Let me tell you a story of how anger ran and nearly ruined my life. Anger was the most intimate relationship I had in my life. When I had that sobering realisation, despite being married, engaged previously, relationships before that, and having this kind of self-professed man about town, good with the ladies persona, I realised that I had never actually been present with any relationship before in my life. Through doing this work, and what I say to the clients is the only emotion that is shamed, or equally is shame itself, is anger, because the social conditioning of having to be a good boy and a good girl. And a lot of us struggle to express that because we see anger as bad. All emotions are neutral until we give it meaning. And the meaning we give it is based on our perception, which is based on the past. So a lot of things that I had grew up around, seeing my mum display anger in terms of like frustration or explosive rage where she shouted or she lifted her hands to us, or my dad who displayed his anger through being passive aggressive, he would shut down and not speak. It affected my communication skills where I thought I had to shout to be heard, I had to be the loudest in the room, or I would just cut people off and ignore them. So my communication style was either to be completely mute or to be an absolute tornado. And neither were healthy, but that's what was modelled to me. Now, obviously, there's more to my parents than just that. But in terms, for the context of this video, where did it come from? That's what I was seeing. And then in the kind of outside environment as well, where I grew up is basically the Catholic Protestant hotbed of the world. We're the southwest of Scotland, so we have the overspill from Glasgow, we have the overspill from Northern Ireland, and it's quite small town mindset anyway, like people know everything about everybody and what they don't know a lot of the makeup. But a lot of the sectarianism is linked to the two Glasgow football clubs, which is ridiculous, right? That's kind of how it is. And then you have the cultural component of Scottish people where, for a lot of us, and this is a generalisation, but a lot of us were like always the bridesmaid, never the bride. There's a hyper-vigilant kind of anxiety locked into Scottish people where we then got off in this persona of being angry and aggressive and not so much violent, but Glasgow is a pretty violent city, and it's been kind of leading the way in Europe for statistics for a long time, many years. What I've come to realise is that anger is a secondary emotion. Anger is fear's big brother. So when the inner child feels afraid, it will shut down and it'll minimise itself and it'll hide. Anger will come along eventually to try and kind of get him to kind of stand up. But it's a secondary emotion, it's a mask, because peel the anger back, you've got sadness and fear. Anger can be a look. Could be like a stern look. Behind that look is the unmet needs of a little child, masked in sadness, but not wanting to be weak, not wanting to be prey to the environment. It has to at least put on this facade of, I am scary, because then maybe you will take a step back. So it's a fight or flight defense mechanism. And that was the same for me for many years after being bullied at school. And I feel as if I'm jumping stories a little bit, but stay with me here. So the anger was built from what I saw, not as an absolute blanket statement, but in most interactions, there was an impatience. There was like a short fuse, if you like, and then there was someone that just shut down and just withdrew the love when they were angry. So there was passive aggressive, and there was very active frustration, rage, and even like the backhand or the smack as we get in Scotland. And that starts to cultivate what we perceive as normal. And of course, eventually we'll get to a point where we don't want to be in the receiving end of that. The irony and the paradox is that we join that behaviour. Not because we now all of a sudden have changed our mind and we think that that is conscious or that's the right way to go. It's actually a very deep, unconscious behaviour of the inner child to model, well, maybe if I'm just like you, then maybe I won't get into trouble as much. It's actually deeper than that. Again, it's actually a desperate way to bond with said persecutor or parent or whatever way you want to look at it. But for me, it was the familial setting in certain capacities. There was the environment in certain capacities. And then there was the actual, like my teenage years when I went through bullying and things at school. Without having to pick all that apart, basically I got to a point where I was over being afraid, at least I thought. So I had to at least put on this mask, which was, no one's ever going to make me feel like that again. I would have a bit of this short temper where and I'm very loyal to my friends. So I would get involved. There was always a fight, really, where we grew up. Some more serious, some just like bar skirmishes in a nightclub, and then that was it over. It's never who I was, really. I always wanted to connect and bring people together. It was a skill of mine. I loved doing that. I loved seeing people laugh and enjoy themselves. But to try and stay part of the herd, I thought I had to make myself out to be a certain way. And the more you practice something, the more you become it. Then it went too far. I assaulted someone. I had a couple of assaults, a couple of breaches of the peace. And then I seriously assaulted this person with a glass. I don't guilt and shame myself about it anymore, but saying the word still brings up a little bit of residue where you think, wow, that's not the right thing to do, regardless of what's going on. Nor am I getting to the point where if someone's aggressive or angry or violent towards you, I'm not suggesting for a moment that you hit pause and say, oh, this person's been through some things in life, cool, let me just allow that behaviour. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there are layers to this. And of course you need to protect yourself. Of course you need to set healthy boundaries. And of course, in your consciousness, when you can see that there's reasons and layers to the other person to why they behave in a certain way, then there's a little bit more forgiveness for self and forgiveness to the other person we can go on. More importantly, the more you integrate this stuff in yourself, you raise yourself in frequency that these people aren't a match anymore, and very rarely do they come in. They may come into your experience not because there's something for you to integrate, but actually from your soul's consciousness that you're one of the people that can handle this for the collective consciousness to rise. That doesn't always feel like a gift though. Anyway, I digress. So to bring it back, so I ended up out on bail for a year, and this is when I was applying to get back into university. I was applying to go into teaching as a physical education teacher. So I nearly never got into that. And I used to remember being at parties with the so-called kind of popular people, and a lot of them were pretty dangerous. A lot of them were actually really beautiful souls as well that had just some really fucking traumatic upbringing. Again, not an excuse, because at some point we need to reparent the inner child. But what was masked as these big, bald, tattoo-clad, muscly, hard men, there was actually a real softness to a lot of them as well. There was actually a real beauty to all of them, but they were so far gone and indoctrinated into that system. Some of them had been in prison and out, so it was that institutionalization for a lot of them where that's all they knew. That was that false sense of safety through what was familiar. A lot of them were following the footsteps of their fathers or how they were brought up in the system or their uncles, and a lot of it, as I said, is a desperate attempt to be just like them, all the while hurting yourself because you actually just want to be accepted for who you are. So I gave up a lot of who I was because I felt it wasn't safe to be me, so let me try and be more like you. But the problem was I wasn't a hard, I wasn't a gangster. I got good at looking after myself in certain capacities, but it was never the first port of call for me. I would much rather break bread and see if we can talk it out. I would much rather, before that, just have everyone get on. I had a real knack for bringing people together, and I was a good laugh. But underneath the laugh was a performer, was someone that was playing the role of jester. It was Loki, the trickster, trying to play off there, because for a lot of comedians that we look up to, that value of humour and making other people laugh comes from the void of the sadness and the real pain that they grew up in, and they don't want another person to go through that, so they dedicate their life to giving the opposite. That only works though if I've integrated that and embodied that fully within self, and at this stage I hadn't. So I got off on being popular, and I would wear any mask that I had to try and be accepted from other people, because I didn't want to go through the rejection that I had at school. All the while though, I'm rejecting my authentic self. So there's always the paradox, there's always the equal and opposite in terms of the 3D consciousness. So I would be in these parties with these certain people and I'm laughing along, but when things were getting real, I'm looking and I'm having a conversation with myself going, what the hell are you doing here, Mark? Not judging these people that I'm better than them, but that the situations I was putting myself in, I was better than that. It just wasn't right for me. But it was as if I couldn't pull myself away. I was so addicted to being in that. I was getting off so much of being Sparky Boy or Spark or Uncle Spark. That was my nicknames. Because I always looked after people. I could bring people together. I could do impersonations. I could dance. I would make up jokes. I had good banter. I was quick-witted. And then, of course, there was status coming from these so-called, not even so-called, a lot of them were like dangerous, hard men, where it was like a safety blanket. If I know them and if I'm good to them, then maybe I won't be hurt like I was in the past. But these people are very volatile as well. So one wrong word, one wrong look, there's no loyalty there. They can turn on you very quickly. And I was hyper aware of the fragility of the environment that I was in, but I was so addicted to the praise the connection, even though the connection never felt fully safe where I could be at ease and be myself. And then lo and behold, I think it was Tony Robbins, his first mentor, had said, you are the product of the 5 people you spend most time with. And even when they did the human genome experiment, right down to the individual expression of the cell, they see what influences the cell's expression most is actually the neighbouring cells. So from a cellular level right up to our human kind of biology and need for connection, we are hyper influenced by those around us. So you're never going to heal from a drug addiction if you're living in a crack den. Eventually you're going to succumb because the stimulus from the environment is too big. So although I consciously wanted to leave there, I was building this subconscious attachment to that. And there was a kind of weird thrill of it as well. And all of it was kind of like a twos up at a deeper level to both my parents, where I was just looking to be loved no matter what. And this is at really deep levels of the psyche, folks. And this doesn't come through pulling timelines out or going back and digging into the past. I can get this through hindsight. This has been through going into the body and releasing certain parts of the body and allowing the energy starting to flow up. So this isn't a top-down cognitive process that I'm saying here. I'm bringing this together. This took many, many times to get to this point. But I started connecting the dots, picking up the Hansel and Gretel breadcrumbs along the way, that there was multiple layers of why I was behaving in a certain way, because I would maybe be in a fight at the weekend, beat someone up pretty bad, and then I would lie all day Sunday, sometimes to Monday, Tuesday, replaying it in my head, feeling like a piece of shit. So we're all born with 6 core wounds. My core wound was guilt. So anger was the perfect vehicle for me to reaffirm that at a soul level, I'm going to live with this guilt all the time. Because it's not how I was brought up. I wasn't actively taught to beat people up. But this is where my mum can be a little bit delusional, because she would look at me, I can't believe he's behaving like this. But she would be the one that lifted her hand to my sister and I. Now, I'm not suggesting, because my mum may or may not watch this, and she tends to take a lot of things to heart when I'm speaking like this, and then when I'm not, she's okay. But I made a deal a long, long time ago that I would speak more to the collective problem, how it affects all of us, rather than trying to protect other people and then not fully express myself. So this isn't a complete summation of how my mother was. So I'm not suggesting that I was physically beaten from sunrise to sunset all day, every day. I wasn't, but I was just a typical kid that sometimes was a pain in the ass trying to get the attention of my mum. And if I wasn't doing things exactly how she said, she would blow up very quickly. And if I still never adhered to the shouting, very quickly a slap came, or a backhand, or her crucifix ring would get battered off. And whatever way you dress that up, that's not normal. To Scottish people it is. Oh, that's just the old school parent. It's not normal. That has an imprint in the tissues, and the body remembers but the mind forgets. So we can try and justify this from a story lens. And for a lot of us, this is why most people have a problem with anger, because we hear these new age spiritual catchphrases like, well, our parents were doing their best with what they knew at the time. So it's not but it's also and. Yeah, I can see that. And a lot of it, my mum was just repeating what her mum did to her. So I understand where it came from. Still doesn't make it right though. I'm sorry you've been through that, mum. And that's not my fucking fault. It's just not. So for as long as we try and convince ourselves that there's not anger in there somewhere, and your body in all its intelligence will try and protect you from these painful memories, where it will wrap guilt and anger up as one. It might put a layer of shame over there. The fear and sadness that's in there, the anger will be wrapped over that to try and stop us from feeling. Because when we feel sad and fearful, for a lot of us, we can be a sitting target. So fear will paralyze us. Anger is more of a mobilized energy. In terms of the nervous system, fear is more dorsal, or it can be a freeze response as well, where it's dorsal and sympathetic, whereas anger is more sympathetic, it's more mobilizing. So fear is paralyzing, anger is mobilizing. Sometimes to go into the layer of fear though, we need to meet ourselves where we're at. So if you're angry, but be healthy with your expression of it. Because what I do know from cancer and Lyme's disease and depression and PTSD and anxiety and sleep apnea and insomnia, night terrors, you name it, from a nervous system point, hypervigilance, always looking over my shoulder. What you don't express and you suppress will eventually be expressed for you, usually through dis-ease, especially resentment. Resentment is the deepest non-expression of anger. So although my mum's frustration and maybe the rage could have been expressed more healthily, at least it was kind of coming out. Resentment is where we want to let it go, but then we swallow it back in. This is why the body and our jawline like words that we wanted to say, but we don't. A lot of anger gets stuck in here. You'll see a lot of people when they're angry, they bare their teeth. You won't want to do that, so you'll just go here, but behind that closed mouth, that's how it looks. That has the jaw really, and your TMJ, which has an effect with your whole lymphatic system, the fascia, the connective tissue. There's so many signals that the body then starts to get. If it's not going, it needs to go somewhere, because energy is always in flux. Motion, energy and motion, it's never stagnant. So we need to allow it to free flow. But for a lot of us, we weren't taught healthily, not even anger, like any emotion, how to be with it, how to express it, how to see it as a part of ourselves, but not who we really are, not as a false sense of self. It's a part. And when you allow that part to come and go, then we can return to being wholeness. So for as long as we push things down, we're never going to rise up in consciousness. So that's where some of the teachers that you may look in, like even some of mine, I won't name them on this video, just out of respect. But I don't agree fully, which is good. I don't have them on the pedestal, I have them here, I have them in my heart. There's good and there's bad. But a lot of them, they avoid going to the past. So there's emotional and spiritual bypass in there. So how can your soul ever be free? How can your body ever feel safe if we're still denying ourselves? But we can put hashtag self-love at the end of the caption and that makes everything okay. No, self-love is acceptance. Acceptance is both the light and the dark. So love is not love and light. Love is light and dark. It's the Holy Trinity. It needs both, and it is both. It's in the light, it's in the dark, and it's in the beyond. It's both and it's neither from a quantum lens. For a lot of us, we don't know how to express that because we've never been taught. Not by a book, but more so from experience. We've never had it either, actually. A lot of us never had that at school either. With a lot of passive-aggressive, sarcastic teachers, or we get punished if we weren't perfect in a certain way. And again, we can't answer back because then there's detention and then there's ramifications. So for a lot of us, for these first 14 to 18 years of life, we're being programmed to be a candidate for the system where we're just very docile. And all that does is build up that anger that's been there the whole time because it's still not had a healthy outlet, and it will leak out, leaky behaviours. So I encourage you to look at where you may or may not be doing that. And then when you become aware of it, that's a great first step. But as I said, acceptance is really what allows us to then take aligned action. I call this the AAA batteries of life. Okay, so to change your reality, you need to change your energetic state. Your energetic state is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. Most people bypass how they think and feel. They're just acting subconsciously because they're not even consciously aware of the thoughts that they're having, which are 90% the same as the ones you had yesterday and the day before and the day before. We don't go to feelings because we've never been taught how, and our feelings, especially for men, are scary. So no, let me just live here. So when the body doesn't feel safe, which is all of us from the lens of an inner child at one point, there's a snapshot where our core wound is revealed through our deepest dominant thought. Whereas I'm unworthy of love unless. So in a bid to not have our parents or our primary caregivers angry with us, where there's ramifications for not behaving the way that they want us to, we sacrifice our authentic self to try and be more like them. And usually that's something that's learned and mirrored behaviour, and we see that from how we learn through mirror neurons and things like that as well. We pick all of this up and we're just sponges, hypnagogic sponges for information, especially these first 2 to 3 years, definitely the first 7 or 8. And actually by the time you're 6, your soul is said to know its life purpose. So all of this can become very mixed from the body, the mind and the soul. They're not in coherence. So when we get to certain parts of our life, whether it's failed relationships, our bodies starting to break down, our mental health starting to suffer, or our intimate relationships, or even right through to a relationship with money and wealth, career and success. Success to me is peace, but in traditional social terms, in terms of being a fulfilling career beyond the money, just being completely fulfilled in it, but monetary also. We'll sacrifice these certain parts to try and live this familiar existence where we feel less than our parents. And all of it is superpositioned by ourselves, but that doesn't excuse some of the behaviours that have dictated that. So the anger was something that I was in denial that I had for a long, long time. Yes, there was guilt. Yes, there was fear. Yes, there was unworthiness underneath all of it. But I could only access these points when I actually stopped lying to myself that I wasn't angry and allowing myself to come out. Because when somebody said something, I would turn around and I would have a quick reaction, maybe punch and we start fighting. That's not a normal, loving, calm, centered human. That's someone that's got issues. And what I did was subconsciously take the anger that I couldn't express to my parents out into the street. Again, not an excuse. But for me, it just helped give clarity of why I was behaving in certain ways. Who was I really angry with? I was angry at myself. I was angry at myself that I couldn't stand up to them. I was angry at them because they wouldn't allow me to just speak my mind. They were so insecure at certain moments where when I ask a question, more so my mother, if I asked a question, she thought I was challenging her authority. In fact, it's not fair. It was my mum and my dad, because my dad got off on his intelligence. My mum just wanted peace and quiet. So if I asked something, she said, "Don't answer me back." And I went, "I'm just asking a question." So there's this whole confusion about being expressive. Everything was like a trigger for a lot of... There's deeper threads to this. This isn't about playing the name, blame and shame game. It's not about bashing my parents either, because there's a divine order in all of it, if we have the courage to go there. But the first step is peace. You can't heal if you're at war with your own nervous system. So the first thing you always need to do is you need to regulate. From there, as you go up what's known as the polyvagal ladder, from dorsal or sympathetic, which is most people, up into ventral, which is safety and connection. When I really started to learn this and how much intelligence the body held on to, everything started to click into place for me. Because I did a lot of work here, a lot of mindset work and going in and past life regressions and dipped my toes into like energetics and a little bit of somatics. But when I really realised that how much the trauma is not in here, the issues are in our tissues and we hold on to it, it's like, wow. So I was always anxious, stressed, overwhelmed, hypervigilant, always on guard, hand up, ready to go, just in case. It was fear-based emotions, but it was coming out as leaky behaviour. I'd growl at people, I would snarl, I'd have an eyebrows down, all of which to kind of show people that I wasn't a pushover. But I didn't want to be pushed over and I didn't want to push anyone. I actually wanted to pull people together. But I couldn't do that because I wasn't able to pull all of my suppressed parts together. So once I started to regulate the nervous system and go up that ladder of the polyvagal back to safety and connection, then I could start going up the ladder of consciousness. Then I was able to really sit with anger. Then I actually had techniques and tools to actually go into certain parts of the body, mostly liver and gallbladder it was for me that came up time and time again. Solar plexus was a big one as well. That's where I actually ended up having the cancer round about the same time. Anger runs really, really deep for a lot of people because it's resentment that's actually running the roost. And that's what's linked to your mother and your father wound, if you haven't fully learned how to express this. And the mother and the father wound makes up the unworthy wound, basically saying you're unworthy of love. Who would not be angry with that, given that love is life, life is love? So when you're saying you're unworthy of love and you're not good enough to be loved as you are, basically you're saying you're not worthy of life. So unlike Dr. David Hawkins' model that has shame at the bottom, I feel unworthiness is a level below that. And when I speak to people often enough in this space, when we have our calls together, 9 times out of 10, that's what's at the root of it. They don't feel good enough. They're sabotaging their life because they're trying to the brain's trying to take them to this familiar level of safety. Even though it's shit, at least it's familiar shit. At least we can predict it a little bit and we can put in worst case scenarios to try and protect ourselves. But you're never going to go to the next level of freedom and liberation and bliss and inspiration and peace and love and connection and flow if we're stuck in this. So some of my teachers, as I said, they'll avoid the past like the plague. That to me is avoiding your full liberation. We've got to go there, but we've got to go there together. The nervous system needs to be co-regulated just as much as it's self-regulated. We're not as humans designed to go alone. We know that through COVID. That was one of the worst things they could do with us was self-isolation. You go to prison, the worst thing they can do is solitary confinement. Biologically, we are built to connect. So there's nothing weak about this whole new age feminism stuff that's coming in just now, or toxic masculinity, or judging the OnlyFans girls or whatever meant to be. Like, we're never going to rise together as one for as long as we're buying into this men versus women, vaxxed versus unvaxxed, left versus right, Republican versus Democrat. All it does is perpetuate this illusion, the delusional illusion that we're separate when we're never not connected to that. So that means all your parts, the fear, the guilt, the shame, the anxiety, the depression, the unworthiness, the pride, the apathy, whatever it may be, all of that's still connected to the one, pure consciousness. It doesn't judge. Only we do, based on how we have been taught, what's been shared with us. So the anger needs to come out the tissues first. There's a number of different ways we can do that, but I want to get to the root cause of the resentment for you. I want to know what makes up your deepest dominant thought. And that's why I'm offering a free call to do that, because this is the pathway to liberation for everybody. And we can have a chat. It will take no more than 15 minutes. I'll ask a couple of questions and I'll figure what that is for you very easily. And when we can go through that and you can see how much this is running the subconscious behaviours that sabotage your health, sabotage your wealth, sabotage your relationship, because underneath all of it, you don't feel good enough. You don't feel worthy of more. You get to a certain level and you bring it back down again. We need to go, the only way out is through. And it's got to be, with all of that stuff from energetic matter to physical matter, it devolves down from the one source consciousness into what we perceive as these physical objects. But you put it under a microscope, it's all made of the same energy. Particles bounced around, but even deeper than that, in the pure space, there's just pure light. But you only shine as a human if you embrace your dark parts. And that's scary for a lot of people. Especially if there's an anger, especially like me, if you've got a history of being around violence, or maybe you were violent yourself. But that doesn't need to be your future. So most people aren't creating a new future, they're creating a familiar past, disguised with little kind of snowdrops here and there, that there's different, but the story's just the same. And eventually they revert. It doesn't need to be that way. So we're going to figure out what your deepest dominant thought is, and I'm going to create a little pathway for you, so how to the corresponding emotion, and give you some ways, I'll tell you some ways that how you can do that. And if you would like some help with it, then of course this is what we dedicate our life to. We can do that for you, absolutely, because anger, as I said, is the most shamed emotion other than shame itself, and it is running your subconscious. And there's no point in denying that you're not angry at certain things anymore, because to deny your anger is to deny your freedom. It's a part of self that needs love. And the more that you love it, the less it will feel its need to express. It only comes out as an expression because it's left a lasting impression on you from your younger years. And it's time for it to go. So, in the caption below this video, click the link, book in. There's no love and peace application form questions you need to put in. Just fill that in, pick a time slot that suits you, and we'll go on the phone and we'll have a call. And as I said, within 15 minutes or less, I'll pinpoint what your deepest dominant thought is, give you a pathway out, and if you'd like our help to do that, then 100% would love to do it. But this is the pathway to the peace, the love, and the simultaneous success. You don't need to sabotage one for the other anymore. You're worthy of all of it. There's just been some life moments that have skewed your perception, but before we can shift the perspective, we need to process the stuck emotions, and before we process that, we need to have peace within the nervous system. I'm going to give you a playbook and a pathway to have all of that for absolutely free, because this nearly killed me, and I'm going to leave you with this last part. Here's the paradox of this whole thing. When I was on my knees asking for help, humbly saying, please, this is ruining my life, it's ruining my relationships most part, where I would either be sarcastic, or I'd be angry, or I would say spiteful things to people, or punch holes in the wall, or whatever it may be, and then I would have shame and guilt, and it was robbing me of the deep connection that is all I ever wanted. So I asked for help, and then I went into a deep meditation, and nothing dark or sinister here, but I could see I was like in a forest and in the woods, and I could see like just a shadowy being. As I say, there was nothing to worry about, but they told me it was anger. Mr. Anger, he said. I said, where are you going? With an angry tone. He said, you told me to go. And I could feel my bottom lip going in this meditation. I was so fucking sad that it was leaving, because then it hit me that behind all this Lothario bullshit that I'd constructed, being married, being engaged, blah, 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 the most intimate relationship I had my whole life was with anger. But now I could finally see what it was. And it was my fear's big brother trying to protect me my whole life. And I knew where I was going, it couldn't come, at least not in that form anymore. But I didn't want it to leave, because I could feel like there was this thread from me in my solar plexus getting pulled away. The more that they walked away, it was starting to come out me, and it was ready to be cut. And it was bringing up my fear of abandonment, my fear of rejection, because I was like, don't leave me kind of thing, but I also knew that you couldn't stay. And I said, I'll leave because you've asked, but I can also come back anytime you like. And I cried, and I felt quite dissociated for a number of days after that, because there was this emptiness that of course is amazing. It's space that I can then fill it, but I didn't know how, because I created this false sense. I mean, I did, my higher self did, but three-dimensional Mark struggled. But something in me knew just to grieve it, just to mourn and let it go. Now, the world that we live in now, where there's a lot of kind of dangerous people around the world in a number of capacities, but there's a lot of dangerous charlatans in my space specifically. One of the things I'm very grateful for is where I come from now, because all of us kind of have that bit in us that if we smell bullshit, we're going to call you on it. And for me, I feel as if I'm a custodian of this work. That's not from self-inflated ego. That's just, I haven't been through everything I've been through in my life to not do something positive with it. And given that all emotions are neutral until we label them, anger is no different for me now. If I need to kind of snarl a little bit at someone and say, hey, absolutely not, don't speak to me like that. Don't speak to me like a piece of shit. That's not on. I don't let anyone do that. I wouldn't expect you to allow me to do that to you. Whatever's going on for you, I hope you sort it out, but projecting it onto me ain't happening. Don't do that again. Now, that can go one or two ways for a lot of people. Oh, what the fuck are you going to do about it? That's where my mind goes here, because that's the kind of, that was my norm of hearing. Like, I'm not doing anything about it. I'm telling you right now, this is what I'm doing. You don't talk to me like that. That's usually enough if you can maintain that frame. It doesn't need to go into physical violence and going beyond that. That's then your choice. That's unintegrated anger from your part. But we've been very clear with it, that it's liberating. There's health in that. You can hold a strong frame knowing that you're not going to be fucking pussied about or pushed over. But when you really integrate, you can see the wounds behind the person. You can state the healthy boundaries and say, hey, is there something going on that rather than projecting and shouting towards me, you want to talk about? Because I can be an ear for you as long as you dial this back down and don't speak to me the way you're speaking to you. I can listen. I can help just by being here. But the conversation's over if you keep going the way you are. But if there's something underneath it that's making you a bit, why you feel so frustrated, why you're so on edge, I'm happy to talk it through with you. And you'll be amazed sometimes at just, because that's coming from a loving place, one, to self. You're not succumbing to survival energy though, because you have a regulated nervous system. You can speak very eloquently, you can be very poised, you can be very present. You're choosing love for self, and in that moment that's rippling out to choose love for them, to show them, hey, I see you. Beyond this, I see what's really going on. And I'm not going to fill in that gap with assumptive stories, but I'm just saying I'm here. What their inner child actually hears for the first time is, shit, I don't need to be this false self to be seen. A lot of them may throw that back in your face because they don't know how to handle it. They're not doing it consciously to be a dick. They're doing it because they've never had it before, so they don't know how to receive it. But you've got a choice then to keep your dignity intact. You can turn your back and you can just walk away and go about your day. If it triggers something in you, then there's deeper work to be done, and sit with it. But you don't need to react the same way. So if someone breaks into my house with my wife and kids sleeping, I'm not going to unpack their trauma for them. I'm going to unpack them from my house because I'm going to protect what's most important to me. And I would say that it would be the same for you guys watching this video. In that moment, you're not going to shame or feel guilty about your anger when it's about protecting what's most meaningful to you. But even there's layers to go through. And just because the kind of default behaviours from what you might have seen in such a situation, or what people around your area that you grew up in might have done, doesn't mean you need to follow suit. But only when you integrate these wounds at a deep, visceral level, from the somatics, from the energetics, and then also from the cognitive. We need mind, body, and soul. Soul, body, mind, in that order. Then you're free. So anger doesn't need to run your life anymore. Where you have sarcastic quips, which is really just passive aggression coming out as sarcasm disguised as banter. I was the king of that for years. And it's a way to try and pull people down to feel as miserable as you, because actually you have a value of connection. And a lot of people can do that when it's like tall poppy syndrome. When people are doing good, they'll try and tear them down rather than taking inspiration from it and rising up. All of this is a game of frequency. And if you don't heal this stuff by being in it to then go beyond it, it's a breeding ground for injury, illness, or disease. And I don't say that to scare or fearmonger. I'm just saying you have a choice. You have your sovereign choice to really do something about this, or keep going the way you're going. But just look at your health, look at your wealth, look at your relationships now in this moment. What are the patterns between all of that? Whose patterns even are they? Are there mirrored patterns from what you've seen growing up? Is that what you want for your kids? Is that what you want for yourself going forward? Or are you ready to let it go? And if you are, I encourage you now to go directly below this video, book in that call. We'll locate your deepest dominant thought, show you a pathway how to shift it, and you can only call in anger healthily as and when needed, rather than let it run your subconscious as Siamese twins with guilt and unworthiness.